thank you, and thank you, Music Monday, for having me, because I do not play a note. So I was going to have this be my great accordion solo debut, but I didn't buy an accordion yet. So anyway, I'm not a historian, I'm not a writer, but some of my favorite writers are right here. And so I'd like to acknowledge Kitty Ledbetter and Caitlin McConnell, and Wayne Glenn's not here, but he's a great one. Crystal Payton, who wrote the Silver Dollar City, the story of Silver Dollar City, that my dad actually started after he retired and then passed it off to her. And Tom Peters and Brooks Blevins from Missouri State, who have chronicled a lot of great Ozark Jubilee history for us to read. And I think also acknowledge Rita Spears Stewart for compiling some great interviews in the Springfield Magazine articles, and then into the story of the Ozark Jubilee at a time when the actual characters were still alive. So a lot of them are gone now. So anyway, but I'm not a historian. I want to disclaim that right away. I'm a guy who tells stories that his dad told him. So, and actually Ozark Jubilee happened before I came along. So something to know about my dad was that his relationship with the truth was tenuous. And he believed that if a story was good enough, it didn't matter if it was true or not. So he was cool with that. So anyway, regardless, I guarantee you that you will get what you paid for tonight. Exactly, your cover charge will be worthwhile. So anyway, Dad grew up in Mattoon, Illinois. Not a lot happened in Mattoon, but as a child, in the summertime, he rode bikes with Carl Switzer. Who knows who Carl Switzer was? Alfalfa of our gang. And but he did have a celebrated career. Actually had two wonderful careers at Ozark Jubilee and then at Silver Dollar City. And so I was able to springboard into a really great career at Dolly Parton's Dixie Stampede for a while too. Maybe as a result of that, I'm not sure. But anyway, Dad started his career as a continuity writer for WJEF in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and it was post-vaudeville, post-Chautauqua time in radio. Yes, sir? It was really just a copywriter. So, but in the old days, they had different terminology, but continuity was just to keep the keep the flow of the writing going. He wrote comedy, he wrote news, he wrote commercials, he wrote all of it. And so in about 54, he learned about this company in Springfield, Missouri called Crossroads Productions, excuse me. And their deal with ABC to produce a TV show. And now that people actually had TVs in their living room. So he was intrigued by that, and that was the story that you just heard, is that he wrote to Cy, and I just love retelling this. I apologize for doing it again, but he said, "Someone once told me, if you want the straight story, go directly to the horse's mouth. Dear horse's mouth." I just love that. But I don't tell stories over again, do I? No, didn't think so. Okay, good. But anyway, and we've got some really fun photos that I wanted to share with you that I dug out of the archives. Kitty, I'm sorry I didn't drag those out when you were writing your book. But he met a lot of cool people along the way. At WJEF, he worked with Eddie Rochester Anderson, who was a comic actor and did a lot of vaudeville right into the golden age of radio. Let's see here. That letter that Dad wrote to Cy, I was told by other people that when they came into Cy's office, he'd dig it out of the file cabinet, he'd read it to him, and he said, "I just read this because it makes me laugh." So I think that's awesome. So Dad and Mom and my oldest sister, Nikki, moved to Springfield, and he became the head writer for Ozark Jubilee, and he kept journals all through the 1950s and 1960s. And when he passed, I got the 1960s journals, but I never could find the 1950s. Can you imagine the stories that would be in there? And my mom said that he was mad that Cy fired him and he destroyed them. So Anyway, don't know if that's true or not, but anyway, he did love copywriting, and he loved the characters in the Ozarks. They're such rich, colorful people, and he loved Red Foley and was a drinking buddy of Red's, and Red was quite prolific at that. I think that's fair to say, and he was also one of the ones that when Red didn't show up for rehearsal, they would dispatch his buddies to go find him. And so he'd disappear on a bender, but he'd always made it to showtime. And Dad always said that when that red light went on, he was the master showman. But when the red light went out, he might pass out on the stage. So, and in fact, he told Rita Spears Stewart in her book Ozark Jubilee Remembered that sober, Red Foley was the kindest, most humble man you'll ever meet in your life. Drunk, he was just like the rest of us. And glassblower Terry Bloodworth from Silver Dollar City said, Don told me that one of the ongoing challenges of producing a Jubilee was keeping track of Red's dentures. They had 3 pairs of dentures, and they gave them to 3 different trusted chopper wranglers. There's a great picture of Dad with Tex Ritter. He dearly loved cowboy star Tex Ritter, and Tex would come to the house, and my parents lived on Cherry Street Court, which is John Q. Hammond's probably first development in Springfield. So Tex would come over and bring his young son, John Ritter, who was the age of my sister Nikki, and they would go out and play on the swing set. And my mother was so proud at this one dinner that she bought a brand new rug. She's just really proud of that rug. And she watched Tex Ritter sit back and smoke this long green cigar. And the ash just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And she was looking at her rug and looking at that cigar. And finally, he let the ash fall on his vest, where he raked it off on her rug. And this is probably a PG show, so I'm not going to share what she told him at that point. So, all right. There's a picture in here of Fran Allison. I know nothing about Fran Allison, so Janie, do you know her? No. She's a pretty lady, so a lot of autographed pictures of her over here. She's a puppeteer. Well, there you go. Lamb Chop. Oh, why didn't I know that? Lamb Chop's not in the publicity photo. Kukla, Fran, and Ollie. Okay, I've learned something here today. So, but Dad also loved Ralph Foster and Cy Simon and Lou Black and the whole crew. And he had great stories about them. Had great nicknames for all of them. Brian Bisney was Walt for some reason, Walt Bisney, but was a favorite character. And his son lives in Florida and could not be here tonight, but he and I have become friends, and through your introduction, I think, and really interesting cat. So, which all of them are really. I mean, you think about Joe Slattery and his influence and his announcing on Ozark Jubilee, and later on Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. And he has a son, I believe, in Chicago who's also an announcer, maybe retired now. So, but there's a great picture in here of Dad and Joe Slattery with the singing cowboy himself, Gene Autry. And at toward the end of the Jubilee, Red was in a pretty bad tax evasion situation and being tried federally, and it really depressed him. So Dad would call Gene Autry. I wish I could remember the practical joke that they played on Red, but he would call Autry to set the whole deal up in order to try and cheer the guy up, because he was really suffering. And he did beat the tax evasion charge, but his career had already taken a toll, which was unfortunate. So let's see here, what else we got? I really like the picture in here of Cy Simon with all the people gathered around him with their hands in his pockets. I think that's awesome. There wasn't anything in him. There was nothing left. So, and there's a picture in here of Dad and Cy, and I was wondering, is it Rex Allen in the middle?
I'm not sure which one.
All right, I'll show it to you in a little bit. So, and if you haven't had a chance, please take a drive through these. It's kind of a hodgepodge of Silver Dollar City and Jubilee stuff, but there's some really fun, and there's some fun stuff from his WJEF days too. So, and don't worry, everybody, I'm going to get everyone out of here on time to go see Cheap Trick tonight. My wife is giving me the look. So, let's see here. Also a great picture up here in this slideshow of Jimmy Wakely and Rex Allen, and they are, I don't know if they're signing autographs for all of my siblings, my brother Tom and my brother Rick and my sister Nikki, and that was before Joe and I came along, but really a cool deal. And there's a funny picture of Tom in between Wakely and Rex Allen, and he's looking at him like, what? But my brother Tom was quite a character. He was a lot of fun. I actually found a photo of my dad on eBay and purchased it, which was great. You know, he's got a great crew cut, which is awesome. Also up here is are copies of, my dad made a 45 record, and it's called Rack-a-Frack. And I wasn't able to put that in my slideshow, and it's one of those moments where you wish that you had asked more questions, because now he's gone. It's like I got 1,000 questions, and I would like to know how Rack-a-Frack came to be. But Dad had a really funny radio falsetto voice that was just hokey as hell, and he sang the falsetto high part while Ray Walker of the Jordanaires sang the low part. And it's a song about what you say instead of cussing. And I got to meet Ray Walker at the Welk Resort, not Elk Resort, the Welk Resort several years ago. And I asked him about it, and he goes, "Oh, I remember. That was about 1956." And he said, and later I put it out under my own name as a single, and it went nowhere. But it actually had Ray Walker's vocal on it, and also some of the players were members of Elvis's studio band, which is awesome. So, but anyway, that was a neat moment. That record was written by Hugh Ashley, who lived in Harrison, Arkansas, and had a number of novelty song hits in his day, and was a country artist before he opened Ashley Music in Harrison. There are some pictures of my dad's diary here, and I kind of showed him here because you could see it's in his own hand. And I dearly love that because my dad had a really unique script, and when I read these, I can kind of go back to, sitting with him and hearing his voice. So I'll fast forward to Silver Dollar City time. A few years ago, Silver Dollar City celebrated their 50th anniversary, and I was able to go back to the 1960 diary and take a copy of every page where the name Silver Dollar City was conceived, because the Hershen boys, Pete and Jack, wanted to call it Ozark Mountain Village, and Dad said, I can't work with that. There's nothing interesting about that. And so he and my mother conceived of the name Silver Dollar City over the dinner table. And then he pitched it to Mary Hershend, and Mary liked it. And he said, and we're going to give out all the change in silver dollars. So when people go home, they'll spend these silver dollars in their local store somewhere. And they'll go, where did you get these silver dollars? Why so many? Well, this weird place in the hills, you wouldn't believe it. And then he was able to spin that into a publicity story, and he made it sound like it was a great stagecoach robbery, that the silver dollars had to be brought in by the Wells Fargo every day. But he could actually embellish and make that a really cool story, and that's just something that I enjoy about reading these diaries is to see that in his own hand. So, and there's a diary entry from April in '60. He's describing Red and John Mahaffey and a drunk Webb Pierce and Farron Young socializing at the Rendezvous down here in the Colonial Hotel. How fun would that have been to have been a fly on the wall?
That is rich.
All right, cool, good. I'm getting better. But speaking of Webb Pierce, Dad never understood why Webb Pierce was a star. He said he has the worst warbling voice I've ever heard in my life. Why that guy's a million seller, I don't understand it. But and after Jubilee, Dad wrote liner notes for Eddie Arnold and for others, and I really loved Eddie Arnold. He was a fabulous person, and did some writing for the Eddie Arnold show as well, which followed. So there's a great picture up here of Porter Wagner, and Porter's inscription was, "Here's to two of the greatest guys in the world, you and me." Oh. And there's a picture of Joe Slattery, and he looks like he's working on a script, and he's leaning on somebody's back. So if you know who that other guy with the big cowboy hat, it's not little Jimmy Dickens, but it's somebody like that. So watch for that one if you can. All right. I only have one picture of Bill Ring, and I've looked for others, and I know a lot of people have a lot of love for who my dad called Fat Boy in the diaries. But Bill Ring was a great character and dearly loved. So, so about the time that Jubilee was kind of winding down, and Dad and Cy kind of got into it, he did continue to work for Jubilee on a freelance basis, but he did a lot of other freelance work. And one of the clients that turned out to be the one to keep was, well, I actually came home and he told my mom, he goes, "Well, I think that we need to move to Nashville." And she said, "Well, that's great. Why don't you have a good time, because I ain't going. So I'm rooted here." So he decided to stay, and he did go to work for Marvel Cave Park, and he'd done a number of publicity stunts. In those days, there was no money for advertising. The Hershans were not wealthy, and they were putting every nickel that they had back into the park. So they were going to put some stores and attractions at the mouth of the cave in order to keep people long enough to take a cave tour, because the cave tour is where the revenue was. So they thought. And so the Silver Dollar City name came about in that vein. So there's some shots in here of my family in the early 60s, and actually one of the only known photos of me wearing Forrest Gump braces on my legs, and those were great. But I'm actually playing with my dad in the front yard, and and the scene from Forrest Gump where he's running in braces, that is a lie. That never happened in braces. So, but no, we were a once happy family, and later, after divorce and things like that, he called it he welcomed my first wife by saying, "Welcome to the fractured family." So, but Dad had a way of finding optimism in everything. And there's another really great analogy. Can I swear here or no? Yeah. All right, cool. All right. One of Dad's favorite sayings was, "In every pile of crap, there's that one shiny kernel of corn." Just put your hope in that. He didn't say pearl in the oyster, but so he always looked for that kernel. And I in moments where I'm a little bit depressed, I think about that kernel of corn. So, but among the publicity stunts, get back to Marvel Cave a little bit, he actually created for the Guinness Book of World Records, the world record for underground altitude, and lifted a hot air balloon off the cave of the cathedral room floor into the air, 211 feet. So, those stunts were successful in getting headlines and getting radio coverage. So he continued to do that. And Mary Hershen asked him to handle the opening of this new theme park. No one knew what a theme park was, but it was designed to occupy those people's time who were waiting for their cave tour. So he also, in that time, Pete Hershen was in the military, and so Don wrote a very compelling letter to Pete's CO because the family needed him back at the park in order to open. So he wrote Dad could write a really good letter, and he wrote to Pete's commanding officer, and they got him released 2 months early so he could be there for the opening of Silver Dollar City. So, all right. But regarding the name, it really came down to just the weeks leading up to opening, and they hadn't decided a name. And Dad went to Mary and he said, look, we got to decide. We got signs to paint. We got, brochures to print. We got to decide on a name here. And he told her, either you use my name or I can't work for you. And he threw down the gauntlet. And then he went home and he said, Mama, I think I have crapped the bed. I think I have ruined my best opportunity at a livelihood. And at 10 o'clock that night, Mary called him and she said, I vetoed the boys. We're using your name. So Silver Dollar City it is. But I was able to take all those pages. I think I started the story earlier. But I took all those pages from the 1960 diary and I printed them and I bound them in books and I gave them to Pete and Jack with the choice words fuzzed out. For the 50th, and they both wrote me a really nice note, and Jack said, we sure gave him a hard time about that name, but turns out you were right. So, but there's another diary entry. I wish my friend David Baker was here because his father was Ned Baker, who was a photographer for the News Leader and the independent photographer, and then later opened the first commission-based advertising agency in this market. So Dad hired Ned to do the first photo shoot at Silver Dollar City. And then the Hershans couldn't pay the bill. So they gave Ned an outboard motor. And then Ned had to buy a boat to put with the outboard motor. And then he had a lifelong love of boats. So he credited them with that love. So, but, and Dave told me that story. It's fun to go different places and hear different stories because everybody's got a Don Richardson story. And here again, truth optional. So I really enjoyed that. So one of the things that Dad did that Don did, I'll try to refer to him as his proper name, but at Silver Dollar City was to take craftspeople and musicians on what he called dog and pony tour. But he took them on publicity tour and everything from local TV to national TV and Mike Douglas show and Dinah Shore and things like that. And he'd take these unusual people out of Stone County, Missouri who'd really they hadn't been in an airplane before, they hadn't been out of the county before, and he had them on national television. And so when I got to Dixie Stampede, I was able to do the same thing, take horses and riders, and learned a lot about horses. I don't know anything about horses, really. So, but Peter Engler, the wood carver, who I always remember going in the wood carving shop and seeing that great big horse that was carved out of one piece of wood. And I asked Peter, well, how did you do that? And he says, well, you just take a big piece of wood and you cut away everything that is not a horse. But he said that they took a dog and pony trip and wound up in Minneapolis or somewhere one night. And so they had a room for the ladies and a room for the guys. And once he got them all settled, he went out in search of a cocktail. And they thought it would be really funny if they changed his room number with the ladies' room number. And so there was a scene later when he came back that involved the police. That was just another great practical joke, but Dad loved a good practical joke. All right. I think it's probably important to note that when Dad made the transfer from Ozark Jubilee to Silver Dollar City, he brought with him Andy Miller, who was a great set designer. And so when you walk through Silver Dollar City and you think, this kind of looks like a movie set, and it kind of looks like Ozark Jubilee, and the sign lettering and things like that, those little notes are like that because Andy Miller brought that touch and that look. So it looks like set pieces to me. And Mary Hershen mandated that all of Don's work and all of Andy's work be kept forever. And so those are all archived at Silver Dollar City. And Lisa Rao, our friend who came along and succeeded my father in that role, she actually dug in those archives and pulled out names. I think Dr. Horatio Hornblower was the guy who built some speeding rail-based craft. They had to take a roller coaster and put it in the 1880s somehow. And so Horatio Hornblower was the mad scientist who created that. So anyway, Lisa was able to borrow on some of those stories. Andy's genius can be seen when you come in, before you actually go into the park and go in the hospitality house. Look at the water clock that's there. It's a fantastic work of art, and that was completely Andy's work, and it's still there today. But that water clock is actually, the motion is moved by running water that is pumped through it. So it's very, very cool, and just a tribute to what a genius Andy Miller was. So, and I don't have it verified whether or not he actually hand painted this silver dollar, but in my mind he did. So, in 1968, my dad had met Paul Henning, who was the creator of Beverly Hillbillies, Petticoat Junction, and Green Acres. And he wrote to Paul and he said, "Are the Hillbillies ever going to go home? And if they do, where are they going to go? Because I've got a ready-made set and all the extras just waiting. Won't you please come see us?" So Paul and Ruth got in the car and they drove here and they went to Silver Dollar City and they fell in love with it. They're both from Missouri, so it was easy to bring the show here. And they filmed, I believe, 6 episodes. And in episode 6, called Silver Dollar Fair, Dad gets a name drop by Granny, and she said, "That's one of those words that Don Richardson would use, that $10 words that Don Richardson would use." But and Paul and Ruth thought that they would build their retirement home in Branson, and then they remembered, "Oh, we have a home in Palm Springs. Wait a minute." So they donated the land that was to be their vacation home site, which is now the Henning State Forest on the west side of Branson, which is a beautiful piece of property. And if you get cool, far out, Bo, you are a wealth of knowledge, and he probably ate all the berries and some of the mushrooms. But and there's a slide in here and some photos of my dad's retirement party from Silver Dollar City, and I think there's some really interesting people. Marilyn Mathis was his assistant, and she was a mountain of a woman, great big square-shouldered woman, and she's leaning on his doorway one day, and he introduces me to her. "John, this is Marilyn. She eats 3 square meals a day and a bale of hay in between." And she just shook her head. And when they bought Gold Rush Junction in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, that was to become Silver Dollar City, Tennessee, and then Dollywood later, Marilyn would go out and hike in the Smoky Mountains in the morning, and on 3 occasions she ran into Black Bear, and on 3 occasions the Black Bear turned around and left. So, but there's great pictures of Andy Miller, of Dad loved Terry Bloodworth, glassblower, fantastic individual who lives here and does amazing art. There's also in these pictures a very young Ann McDowell. Might not have been, what was her maiden name? She was probably not McDowell at that time. So, Kramolowski, yes. Why would you want to give up that name? So, I'd like to acknowledge Mike O'Brien for writing some really heartfelt words. When my father was sick in the last couple of years of his life, there was a series of articles that appeared here, and I think he called attention and gave him recognition for his craft, and that's really important to me. Well, it is a tribute, and he had a long illness, which he still had a great deal of fun in. And I remember bringing my then soon-to-be wife in to visit him in the hospital, and he had his gown full aside, just for God and everyone. And he wasn't. I had to ask him to pull his gown over, but And then he always had to run errands. I got to go to the pharmacy. I go, isn't there a pharmacy here in the hospital? No, I got to go to another pharmacy. And I got to go to Billy's Chili, and I got to see these people, and I got to have a beer with this person. Now, wait a minute. Are you sure? And there's probably some other people in this room that got to shepherd him around, but he found somebody to get him out of the hospital about every day and drive him around and run his errands. So if you're one of those people, then I feel for you. But while in the hospital, he went in for walking pneumonia. He went into a coma. He awoke with Guillain-Barré syndrome. And just about the time he's kind of coming out of that, he developed cancer, and that was kind of the last act. So, but I'm also thinking about that kernel of corn. That's how you remember him. And I love to hear the stories. And at Silver Dollar City, his ashes are down the hill from the Wilderness Church. So when you go in and you look out that big picture window, now there's like condos and shit down there, but I always think about that. And the funny part of that is that it was a very, very cold February day, rainy, and my brother Rick got the responsibility of scattering the ashes. And Pete Hershen loans him a pair of waders that come up to here, and he's got this shoebox with the ashes. He's slipping, he's sliding down that hill. And he gets to a point where he's like, if I go any further, I won't be able to get back up. So the nearest tree just goes over and he goes, enjoy. And my dad would have loved that story and told that story more than I do. But I was in Kansas City at that time. Yeah, I lived in Kansas City, so I missed out on that. No, but I would have pointed and laughed. So, and my brother Rick didn't have the sense of humor for that situation either. So, but at my dad's service, Jack Hershen said to me, he said, I never really knew what it was your dad did, but he sure did a lot of it. But when I go to the park, I always go to the Wilderness Church, and I have a look out that big picture window, and I think about that funny scene, and that kind of gives me a lot of joy. So if you can't laugh at your brother, then who can you laugh at? So, but in 1998, I elected to move from Kansas City to Branson, and went to work for Dolly Parton's Dixie Stampede, which was in the Hershen family of companies. And I got to occasionally meet Dolly and work with her. I got to write for her. I got to direct her in a TV commercial. It was a lot of fun. She came to Branson when she launched her Imagination Library book program here. And I remember KY3 is getting ready to interview her, and they're pinning a lavalier microphone on her lapel here, and it falls down in her cleavage. And her best friend, Judy Ogle, is her personal assistant. And Judy is very delicately fishing that out of there. She says, oh, go for it, Judy. You know what the Inquirer says about us. And that is the Dolly we love. So, there's another great picture here that my wife and I got to go when we opened a very short-lived attraction in Pigeon Forge, and got to spend some time with Dolly. That was, I guess it was, did we go to Lumberjack or Pirates? Lumberjack Adventure, yeah, that one didn't last. So, but then we opened the first Pirates Adventure. Watch for that one in Branson pretty soon. So, but the Pirates Adventure is awesome, and Dolly loved it because she could dress like a pirate. And she loved dressing up like a pirate. It was awesome. So some of you may have wondered about the name change or have an opinion about the dropping of the word Dixie from the Dixie Stampede. So I'll just give you a little skinny on that. That was a Dolly thing. Dolly did not realize, nor did any of us, that word was offensive to certain groups of people. And Dolly does not offend any groups of people. That's not her policy. So she basically said, look, guys, you can keep the name if you want, but take my name off. So you choose. It's me or that word. So it's just a word. It has changed its meaning over time, and regardless how you feel. I often meet the "you're taking our monuments" crowd, and it's not that. It's a private business, and they changed it. I mean, when Federal Express became FedEx, did people write letters? Hopefully not. But anyway, that is the reasoning behind that particular name change. It had to change. We're in changing times. So Dolly recognized that, and they made the right business decision, I think. So there's also a picture in here of me with a Coca-Cola polar bear who mauled me right after that picture was taken. Let's see if we got anything more here. COVID kind of ended my run at Dixie Stampede, and that was okay. After 22 years, it was probably time for a change. And so now, musically speaking, I am the keeper of the most annoying jingle that you'll ever hear. Oh, 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 O'Reilly, ow! So, and I'm really proud of that. I've done the research on it. We have researched to see if we need to change it, and the overwhelming result is we have to keep it. It's our most valuable marketing asset, as people know that. It gets embedded in your psyche, and every time you drive by the sign, you hear that sound. I actually got to meet the vocalist who sang that. You probably know her. And I got to hear the original at Nick Sipley's studio. I got to hear the original track, and they asked her to just riff through the deal, and she was like, zip bop boodle bop bip bop ow, and they kept the ow. So, but it was very cool, and I had to spend the afternoon with John Dillon and talk about the genesis of that jingle, and Dillon's pretty optimistic about it. He goes, that's my biggest hit. Keep playing it if you would. So, in more ways than one. Yeah. It kind of hung around, but he got paid, and everybody's happy. So, and another fun thing, I just put a fun slide in here just because I like it, but I got to be a part of O'Reilly's leadership conference previously this year, and they were looking for a keynote, and I said, has anyone ever heard Terry Bradshaw speak? Because he's hilarious. And they said, why don't you see if you can get him? And I got him, and then I got a discount. And they told me, Terry doesn't do discounts, but O'Reilly was telling me, hey, he's a little bit out of our budget. So they said, well, you can write him a letter. And so I thought about my dad's letter writing, and I spent a week on this letter. And they said, drop the names of all the celebrities and sports heroes that have done your conference before, and put in a personal appeal, which I did, and something else, I don't know. And he enthusiastically accepted and gave us a little discount, and then he made me pay for that when he got on stage. But I can remember we're standing backstage, and one of the vice presidents is announcing him, and he's reading his accolades, and particularly for Fox NFL Sunday. And I leaned over to Terry, and I said, they're going to think it's Howie by the description. And he looked at me, he laughed. He went out on stage, and he told that joke to 9,000 people. And he described how he signed his, he signed his first NFL agreement, his first contract for $27,000. And he said, and that is why I'm here. He said, and then he waves at me off stage, and he says, and John went to work on my contract and knocked a zero off. But the picture is great because Terry we had a 60-foot long stage, and he ran it the whole time. He just ran back and forth. He was down in quarterback pose and moving around and describing Super Bowl action and that kind of thing. And by the end of the thing, he is soaked. And we had a meet and greet set up afterward. And Vice President comes to me and he says, if you want to give Terry a minute to go change his shirt or something, we'll go ahead and do the meet and greet. I go, he didn't bring a shirt. So you got what you got. And so you can, in one of these pictures, he is pulling me in for the full treatment. But it was, about to pull me off my feet. And but he was a blast to hang around with one day. And I walked him to his car afterward, and he said, hey, I hope I didn't get carried away on the Jesus stuff. That's just who I am. And I said, hey, man, we paid for the full Terry Bradshaw experience, and that is what we got. But the O'Reilly adventure continues, a very interesting career, and And I really cherish and honor my father's career and hope that I could have 10% as much fun as he had, because he really got to experience it. So, but I'm grateful that everyone here came out to listen to goofy stories. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to. No, but my boss at Dixie Stampede was Ron Jett. So he was the GM at Grand Palace. But no, Grand Palace was already kind of in decline by the time I got here in '98. So, and they sold it a couple of years later, and the Hall family really drove it in the ground. So, but I did get to, oh, that's your cousins, I'm sorry. But I did get to go to lunch with Donald Trump. No, I didn't, you notice I didn't put that in the presentation. But he was funny, though. He was very funny.
A couple of things. The guy that's signed on the back is Rex Allen.
That's Rex Allen's.
And also,
But whose back is it? The guy with the big cowboy hat.
they both have big cowboy hats. I'll check it again.
All right.
I also wanted to mention that Bill Ring's nephew is here, Mark Ringenberg.
Really? Right on. Right on. Well, I think that's awesome. Right on. I'd love to hear any wild ass stories that you got, because there's a bunch. Oh, there's that. Yeah, in fact, Dad would throw press parties and tell the Hershans to stay away, because he didn't want them to know what the press really required to write those stories. But he got a lot of great publicity for the park, and in a time when they needed it. So yes.
In one of those pictures in the sombrero, it's the Cisco Kid.
Really? So Cisco Kid. I didn't know Cisco Kid. So
Well, I remember him really well because Daddy took us down there, and we had a picture taken with him.
cool.
But when he met my mother, he took his sombrero off and bowed, and then took her hand and kissed it.
Awesome. I did that when I met you, didn't I? What else you got?
You owe a few dollars for saying Dixie.
Yeah, that's right. When we did the name change, I had a swear bucket, and every time you said that word, you had to put $1 in. So no one was on the honor system.
We used to have a TV show on Channel 10 where he let guys like me go on there and perform.
Awesome.
It was great. It was great.
He was.
We also have one on Channel 27 called Ring Around the Waist.
Oh, I didn't see Wilkes come in.
Called in to post it one weekend when Bill was not available. And it's the longest 30 minutes I ever in my life.
And, yes, sir.
We've got a great picture in the museum of Bill when he was doing the show before the Jubilee, one of the Shrine. And he had a tent and awning company sponsor his suit. And his suit made out of tin.
With stripes, I could see that.
Come out on stage and then stripes it on.
That is fantastic. Yes.
What did you do when you were in Kansas City? Were you in
I was marketing director for Tallgrass Technologies, and we made tape storage systems for the early PCs, so which was about as uninteresting as you can imagine, but we had a lot of fun.
were in marketing?
Right, I started in sales, moved into marketing, and had a good run there. It was a lot of fun. Didn't make any money, but that was okay because we did some really good work, and I'm gratified by good work. All right, about to wrap it up. Hi, John Wilkes. There's another reason that I went to Dixie Stampede. Skinny. But thank you for coming out. I appreciate you.
Thank you, John, for being here.